Today, we're going to be interviewing a real life slum dog millionaire from East L.A., Skid Row, made it all the way into the boardroom. He was a corporate executive of a very well-known company in actually the laundry industry, which is a big industry in this country that most people don't even really know about. I never realized it was even an industry, but he's got an incredible testimony. His story is actually being taught in different curriculums around the country. It's being made into a film very soon. You are going to want to hear how he made it from Skid Row all the way to the boardroom. Without further ado, Mr. Robert Renteria. Hello, Mr. Dr. Renteria. An honor to have you with us today. I want to jump right into your story. Tell me what it was like growing up in the Barrio and what that is for those of us that don't know what that is. And obviously, you were also raised in Skid Row. And just tell us about your background.
The barrio is another word for neighborhood. So in our Spanish Mexican heritage, it's called barrio. And if it was, like, say, a black neighborhood, it'd be called ghetto or the hood.
Wow.
So yes, I grew up in East L.A. and it was really, really tough. You know, we grew up in poverty. My mother and father made $1.20 an hour working in factories. And we didn't have a home. We slept in rented apartments. And my father was in and out of jail because he was a heroin addict and an alcoholic. And when he wasn't in jail, you know, he was robbing people to put the needles in his arm. He needed the drugs more than he loved his own family. At the age of 3, my father left our family, and the only legacy he left us was a pile of bills and a bunch of empty bottles of booze in the trash can. My mother, though, she worked in her 2, 3 jobs to make sure her little boy and little girl did not go hungry and they would not become part of the system. At the age of 6, I was in a terrible accident. I almost died. I had to go to a school for the physically disabled and mentally challenged because I could not walk, talk, or read or write. At the age of 9, my mother remarries, and the nightmare starts all over again. And she married an abusive drunk. And he used to come home late at night and pull me out of my room and beat on me till I was black and blue. And he did the same thing for my mother, leaving her bloody and battered. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So I got old enough, I ran away, and I found a new dysfunctional family called gangs. Mm-hmm. And I started running and gunning, stealing and dealing. I started robbing houses, stealing cars, selling drugs, doing drugs. And what happened was I had become my father's son. At the age of 17, my father dies in a halfway house on Skid Row. Skid Row is where the homeless people live in Los Angeles. And when I was 19 years old, I made a drug deal that went bad. And the guy pulled the gun out and said, "Say goodnight," because I had delivered the drugs. And he pulled the trigger twice, and it was a misfire. By the grace of God, I'm running down the street, running away from that apartment, saying, "God, if you let me live, I'll sin no more." And I never looked back. I kept my promise to God, and I joined the military. And the military was the best decision of my life. It changed my life. It saved my life. It made me a man. It made me a better man. And I traveled all over the world, jumping out of helicopters and airplanes.
We're going to get to the Army in a second, but you know, you're right. We've seen so many videos and pictures of Skid Row with all of these homeless people in LA, and you wonder, you know, why are people living outside? How come the community, the city is not taking care of the homeless people? How come we're spending so much money overseas, but we're not helping this community? And we, you know, it's a vicious cycle, which I'm sure obviously you've seen, where you were back in that lifestyle, like, you know, your dad and the ones before you. And we're going to talk later about your grandfather giving you a challenge to go into the Army. But, you know, explain what's really happening in Skid Row. Why is the city not really helping these people?
Well, see, we have money for wars and can't feed the poor. And there's children, teenagers, and adults like walking around lost in a culture of darkness. See, America is a business. People are making money on this. They don't want to solve the problems. Because if we solve the problem, people lose their jobs. And then you're fighting with unions, contracts, and paychecks. So it's a business. And people are suffering as a result of that.
Yeah.
We're the greatest son on the face of the earth, and we can't fix a problem. I mean, look at Big Pharma. Same issue. We can't cure cancer. They don't want to cure cancer. They're making billions of dollars on ailments, just treating the ailment, not fixing the problem.
That does make sense. So you were shot at, you were robbed, you were stabbed. By the grace of God, you survived. And tell us what happened when I think it was your uncle or your grandfather. No, your grandfather challenged you and said, "Listen, if you leave this state and try to do something different, maybe go to the Army, and you'll see in 10 years when you get back that your friends that you've been riding with are going to be doing the exact same thing, if not in jail, if not already dead, if not addicted to heroin. You're going to see them in the exact same position. So you might as well take this challenge and see what happens." And so what happened?
That's when I joined the military. But I had quit school, so I had to go back and get my GED because they wouldn't let me in the military without my high school equivalency. Cut that out. My high school equivalency or my diploma. So I joined the military, and my first assignment was going overseas to Germany, and that's when everything changed. The light bulb went off because I was traveling on trains. I was going to different kind of restaurants because as a kid you had Mexican food. Now you're eating German food, and I met a lot of great people. I worked in a unit called Tactical Operations. Then after I served overseas, I came back stateside, and I was in the First Cavalry Division. I worked in artillery for a while, and then things blew up for me in a good way. And I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I became an elite soldier. I was an airborne paratrooper working in psychological operations.
Wow. What did you learn when you were in the Army? By the way, thank you
You
for your service. Yeah.
thank you so much. It saved my life, first of all. But it taught me about character. Character is not just doing what's right when somebody's watching you; it's doing the right thing when nobody's watching you. I learned about camaraderie and teamwork, and about team building. So after I honorably served our country for over 7 years as a non-commissioned officer, I thought I was ready to get out and come back and be a leader. And so when I went back to LA, the same guys I was running around with were doing some heavy drugs. Some of them were doing hard time in a federal penitentiary, doing 25 to life. And some of those guys had been smoked. They got killed in gang violence and drug violence. So I wanted to leave again because that's not what I wanted for myself. And that's when I came to Chicago in 1990 with $200 in a duffel bag. That's how I
Wow.
got my here. Yes.
That's where you got your first taste of really having an employment job where you're seeing benefits. So you actually became the #1 man in the coin laundry machine industry. So let's jump into it. So your friend, invited you in Chicago. By the way, it's all in the book. I could not, by the way, put this down. I read this in one sitting. It was so interesting. Your story is amazing. So your friend invited, so you actually called your friend. It was kind of an acquaintance, and you asked him if you can stay with him because you wanted to get out of East L.A. You needed to get out of the state. You knew it was life or death. You knew you needed to make something of your life, and it's not going to happen where you were. So you reached out
Right.
to an acquaintance and you said, "Can I stay with you?" And he said, "Sure." In fact, there's actually an interview in his company. So what happened?
Came in here with $200 in a duffel bag until I got my first interview. And when I took the interview, the gentleman who was interviewing me, the owner of the company, said, "I have to pass on you because you don't have the experience." And I asked him to wait a second because I said, "Listen, I'm an honest guy. I work hard. I'm bilingual, and I'll never steal from you." And then he paused and he looked at me and goes, "I'll be back." And he came back in the room after a couple of minutes and he offered me a job. And that's how I got started in the laundromat industry, selling washers and dryers. And I worked hard every day, every holiday, every weekend, where other people were going to the park or taking their girlfriend out to dinner or walking their little doggy named Sparky. I was working. And they never saw me coming because after 6 years, I got recruited and I became vice president of a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Wow. Before we get to the New York Stock Exchange, I love this part of the story where you didn't take no for an answer. He said, "Sorry, sir, you don't qualify. You don't have any experience. You really didn't. You just had the Army and I think in that time you had your GED, but you didn't have this Ivy League degree and
Right.
totally brushed you off. But I love how you responded to him and you said, 'Well, sir, I know I don't have that much experience, but I'm a hard worker. I'm a go-getter. And I will not steal from you. I will value your company and treat your company as if it was my own company." And
Yes.
that really stuck with him. And he obviously left the office, talked to probably a superior, maybe thought about it. Wow, am I crazy for doing this? But he took a chance on you. And I love this part where, showing your discipline that you learned in the Army, the owner was there every morning at 6:30, opening up the office, and you were
Right.
there at 6:15 every single day, working 6 to 7 days a week, and you became the top seller in his company. Talk about that a bit.
Well, the laundromat industry is funny because that's usually not the primary owner's business. They usually work for another company or have other businesses, but they come in every Saturday to buy their parts and look for washers and dryers. Now, all the sales guys, they didn't want to work on the weekend. So I would take their weekend duties, have them pay me, and then I got a chance to go fishing in a bucket and meet all these laundry owners. And it wasn't very long until I knew everybody in the state who owned laundromats. So that was my secret recipe to accelerating my growth as a salesperson.
Yeah.
So I outworked everybody. People were lazy, they were soft, and I was hungry. You know,
Mhm.
I I got here, all I could afford was RV sandwiches 5 for $5. So I mean, I needed to work and I needed to make money. And I wanted the nice cars and the nice clothes like everybody else wants, right? I wanted a better life for myself. So that's what excelled me to get recruited and then land up in corporate America.
Wow. You had that fire in your belly, you had the tenacity, and you had the hard work, that grit. I notice this a lot with immigrants, that immigrants that come from a different country. I know you were born in America, but your family is Mexican. And, my family's Russian and Jewish, and we came to America. I'm a first generation immigrant, and I see a lot of my peers and immigrants work
Mhm.
really, really hard because we know what it's like to have absolutely nothing. And I've seen it in school where people think that they have a degree, so they're owed something. They don't really want to put the work in. But what we see with immigrants is that they work so hard. They'll take the jobs that no one else wants to take. I know we both believe, in legal immigration, but people take the jobs that they don't, but people don't want to take, especially the weekends. So that was your secret recipe. You met with these laundromat owners. And tell us a little bit about the industry, because I wasn't familiar with the laundromat industry. I didn't even realize, honestly, it was a thing. I thought that people just buy laundry machines and they open up and it's a business, but you do consulting. You obviously help them, buy parts. You were selling. You explain the industry a bit for those that don't know about the industry.
Coin laundry industry is a recession-resistant industry, and that we proved that over the COVID-19. That was one of the industries that remained essential, and they didn't lose any volume during that period. So what you're really selling is time, because people who have jobs and children, they don't want to spend the whole weekend doing washers and dryer of their clothes at home. So you take all these big loads of washers, clothes up to the washers and dryers of the laundromats. And then what you do is you're there for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you're back home again. So you're buying time, which is so you can be with your family. But it's a solid industry. It's under the radar. There's no glitz and glamour in that industry, but it's a solid business and very lucrative for some owners.
So you helped investors obviously invest in the laundromat industry as well. In fact, that I think it was the next year, I think it was 1997, where you started, writing articles and publication.
Right.
And you started making a name for yourself. In fact, your name was very much your name was on the street all over Chicago. People knew who you were because you worked 7 days a week, built those relationships. You started
Right.
increasing your sales. You started increasing people started talking about you around the country. Talk about, your owner, the owner of the company you're working with. I mean, he was astounded. You hit, I think, over $1 million in sales a year, which was almost unheard of, especially in the industry. Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
Really
And what
honor.
happened?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then he didn't really honor you and respect you and really want to hear your opinions that you were holding, that customers would want to see. And so you ended up leaving to corporate America. But yeah, talk about that a bit.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but he was a racist. I mean, there was a Christmas party. He leaned over to me and said, "Hey, we're not going to be serving tacos tonight." Or if we were at a pizza parlor with all the sales guys, he leaned over and said, "Hey, if it doesn't work with me, maybe they'll hire you." He points to the busboy. Or
Mm.
we'd be in the warehouse and he'd come over and say, "Hey, let me borrow your switchblade." So, and then when I told him that I wanted to grow into management, he told me I didn't have the skill set. And he has to be happy with what I got, which is what pushed me to go to corporate America. And then when I went to corporate America, he became a target for me. So I was having his lunch now every day with his sales guys because I was beating those guys up to take business for the new company. And so when I got to the new company, I outsold everybody over there. And the CEO of the company says, "Hey, can you replicate what you're doing with yourself with everybody else?" Because I sold like say 1.4 million or whatever it was, and everybody's selling 400,000. My margins are at 36%. Everybody else is at 22 to 24%.
Wow.
So that's how I got the opportunity to take on the new position. And I helped grow the company from something like 6 million to 80 million in just 6 years,
Wow.
both nationally and internationally.
Yeah, you were traveling around the world. I mean, here you are jet setting. You're from the Barrio, right? From East
Right.
L.A., Skid Row. Here you are jet setting around the world internationally as the
Yeah.
vice president of commercial sales division in
Yeah.
this massive company that you just helped explode. And they're like, wow, we really have a golden goose here. And the other owner realized, my God, his racism obviously lost his golden goose. So you talk about that corporate America. I mean, what was that whole experience like, being one of the biggest executives in the industry that you were a part of, coming from Skid Row? Did you like pinch yourself, say, how in the world am I here? Obviously your hard work got you there, but what was it like?
I mean, it was at the beginning, it was great, right? You're flying all over the place, you're eating at, first class restaurants and meeting all these great people. But shortly few years into it, I got disenchanted because they didn't care about people. It was only about the money. And I saw people being oversold, and people are losing their businesses, losing their collateral, their house, and the company didn't care. So I felt like, listen, it's time for me to open my own business after 6 years. So I took another leap of faith and trust in God, and I opened up my own company. Within 3 years, my company became the #1 distribution company in the United States. We were the #1 company in the country just after 3 years.
And I actually want to give a shout out to your company. I know that you didn't ask me to, but Wash Pro USA, you started with another gentleman, John, I forgot his last name, but also another expert in the field. And people thought you were crazy because I think there at that time there was like 6 or 7 big companies
Right.
in Chicago, and everyone thought you were crazy. Who are, these two guys, they're experts. We know this. In fact, you were, you spoke on the panel in Las Vegas at the main, industry
Right.
conference, and you were publishing articles. You were seen as an expert. You're obviously the vice president of commercial sales and a big company in the industry. People thought you were crazy taking the chance to actually be a business owner, even though in your eyes, I mean, it's a natural progression. They're obviously this company you're with in the corporate America, just all about numbers. And, I love free marketing and capitalism, but at the same time, they were ruthless, right? They just cared about the numbers, like you were saying. But you said, you and John had the same vision of using street smarts, using relationships to really help consumers get educated how to start the business, how to maintain the business, and how to sell the business if they want to leave. So talk about jumping in as an entrepreneur. And I know it's going to motivate a lot of people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur themselves.
Working for somebody else, I think it has a short lifespan because you're making somebody else rich. So I want these people to know that, hey, listen, you can do this. So with the expertise that I gained over all those years, I'm trying to share that with people under a company now called Wash Broker here in Illinois. We've transitioned from Wash Pro to Wash Broker because now we're doing in the brokerage business as opposed to just washers and dryers. But it has people to take a leap of faith and to work for themselves. Because if you're going to put a lot of hours in and weekends and nights working for another company and make a salary, why not instead of taking a piece of the pie, take the pie? So I want people to take that leap, and I'm going to help them get from point A to point B. That's what the company is really about. So it's a full service, well-rounded company helping people to own their own business. So I explain about the capital gain investment it's going to take to get in. I help them with their financial analysis, return on their investment, and then I train them how to run the business, how to market the business, and then they're on their own. And I have some owners that own multiple stores. I have guys who started maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and now they're millionaires and they own multiple stores. So it's a very lucrative business, which is under the radar. Everybody's got to do laundry. So like I said, it was one of the businesses that thrived during COVID.
Yeah, that never closed down. You're right. Everyone has laundry every single day. So let's jump into your story. It's obviously going to be a movie. We know this, but your story has been picked up by academic curriculums around the country. In fact, I think even the boxing world is looking at it, but talk about that, how your curriculum is becoming a framework in some educational systems.
Well, what started off as a book, it's now turned into a message. And, so I went from being an author to a messenger. So in the last, say, 17 years when I first started, I released a book you have there called From the Barrio to the Boardroom. The Chicago Public Schools picked it up. We sat down and they wanted to craft a curriculum for the book. And I have the curriculum here. I don't know if you can see it, but here's the framework for the curriculum. And here's the curriculum itself. And this curriculum teaches what's called critical thinking, conflict resolution. And that curriculum is donated at no cost. So I had it crafted. I pay to have it developed, and we donate to schools across America. That book that you have right there is currently being taught in classrooms across America and over 25 other countries around the world. And so I put the book in English and Spanish. And then the following year, the churches got a hold of us. I don't know if you know this. We have a faith-based curriculum, a faith-inspired curriculum to get kids in the Bible study, lead them to Christ, so our kids can see the promised land. So now we work with the churches. So I'm working with kids, mostly, say, 6th grade and people older than us. And I wanted to get to the younger kids because of the gang recruitment. So I wanted to create a book, and it was called Barrio, My Hood. It's a high-end graphic novel, which was voted the best graphic novel in Latin America, Spain, the United States of America, addressing youth issues. It was the #1 book in the country. So, because I wanted to cut the umbilical cord to the gang recruitment. So now I'm working with kids 3rd grade and people older than us and I wanted to go back to the drawing board. And I'm self-funding, mind you, this whole time. We went back and we released an activity coloring book called Little Barrio.
Mm.
So over the course of the last 17 years, I've invested about $400,000 of my own money to build this program. We've donated approximately 40,000 books across the country, and I'm proud to say that we are now being used in multiple verticals, whether it be schools, we're in all the prison systems here in Illinois, all the libraries, homeless shelters, battered women's shelters, police, probation. So it's more of an anomaly. So because I took a blind leap of faith to serve a higher purpose and trust in God that He would get us where we need to go, now this book is going to go worldwide because we just got endorsed by the World Boxing Council. The World Boxing Council is now in 171 countries around the world, and we're currently discussing the alignment of how we're going to reach kids worldwide because they're in the space of mentoring boys and girls ages 8 to 18. So this is a perfect alignment and a perfect partnership to work with the World Boxing Council.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Congratulations. It's well
Thank you.
deserved because you know what? This is the type of curriculum and true stories that children need to read in their youth to talk about, you know, self-esteem and character development and discipline and hard work and faith
Right.
and determination and education. I mean, if you came from Skid Row and you became a corporate executive, the number one salesman in the whole industry, known as the pro, the wash pro in the whole
Yeah.
industry. I mean, it's so inspiring for me. I mean, by God's grace, I also have my own business, but reading this, I'm like, every child needs to read this. It's such a great read. I'm glad you made it into a curriculum. I know you donate a lot of these books. You donate the curriculum to schools and to churches as well. And that's very exciting to hear that people are really, it's really registering with kids because again, a true life story, it inspires them to get away from drugs. Because by the way, you know, I know you mentioned this before, but when your grandfather had that 10-year challenge, what happened when you came back from the army, right? Because people would say, oh, some people would say, oh, it's a waste of time. Don't go to the army. No, you use that time to grow, to get disciplined, to learn about hard work. You know, you wake up before the crack of dawn. They would be, you know, telling everyone to get up. And what did
Yeah.
you see when you came back? I know you briefly mentioned it, but what did you see when you got back into the barrio with all your friends that you used to run with? What happened to them?
I ran into some of these guys at a nightclub, and these guys were some bad guys now. I mean, they were like mafiosos, mafia guys, and they were playing checkers, they were playing chess, and they were trying to suck me back in and calling me a chump and a sellout, and you know other names worse than that. And I didn't want to make my mom, you know, have to bury her child. So you know nobody should have to bury their child. So I just made the decision. Listen, I'm going to get out of here. This is not what I didn't spend the last 7+ years of my life, you know, serving the military, serving our country honorably, so that I can come back and be a dud. So that's why I left. I wanted to make my mother proud.
Yeah.
And I did, you know, something I don't usually tell a lot of people. But when I made it to corporate America that first year and I got my Christmas bonus, I called my mother. I went home for Christmas. I gave her a gift bag, and she said, "What is it?" She thought it was jewelry because girls like jewelry. I said, "No, Mama." I open it up, and she pulls out a set of keys, and she goes, "What does this mean?" And I said, "Mama, this means you never have to take the bus again." So that was like one of the most greatest days of my life to show my mother her son was not a loser. Her son was a winner.
Yeah. By God's grace in America, if you work hard, if you
Hmm.
go for it, if you take risks, if you have discipline, you can go from the barrio to the boardroom. And one last thing I want to mention is also your curriculum. What I love about it is it teaches prevention rather than intervention. Prevention
Correct.
of being in the gangs, prevention of being on the streets, being in jail, being killed early, instead of you know intervening in their lives to actually prevent it and give them the skills, give them the hope, give them the ability and train them in discipline and leadership skills that these kids will need in the real world.
100%. I mean, the secret to success is hard work, determination, and education. And I tell the kids, I said, listen, if you put your street smarts with your book smarts, what is that going to make you? And they look at me and say, what? It's going to make you dangerous. So I'm going to make you dangerous. So the books and the program is more of a roadmap or a blueprint for success, right? I mean, I tell them, look, if you do it hard, life will be easy. If you do it easy, life's going to be hard. And I teach them to dream big because if the dream is big enough, the odds don't even matter. I mean, what did I know about writing books? Now, I don't know if you know this, but about 7 years ago, they turned my book into a play. So we had sold out crowds in Chicago with inner city kids. Now we're talking to some pretty important people about turning this to a film so we could help people all around the world.
Yes. And help kids make a better life for themselves and make better life choices. Because in the book, you really go through your choice. You had this choice or that choice. And that's really what
Right.
it comes down to, is that our life, every single day, it's a choice. We either choose to serve God, we could choose to serve the devil. We can choose to make something out of ourselves or choose to just be like everyone else and kind of just do nothing. We can choose to be an employee and be an employer. What to wrap this up, what is your advice for, I know you kind of went over obviously determination, hard work, but what would be your advice for future entrepreneurs that are considering maybe not joining the coin laundry industry, but just becoming an entrepreneur? What would be your 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would definitely give them?
Well, I would say if you're going to get into a business, don't do it blindly, right? I mean, if you don't buy it for sale by owners, as an example, because you have to assume that all sellers are liars. So consult with somebody who's in this space. In my case, it was laundry, but consult with somebody in the space you're going into, so you understand what you are getting into, and then make sure that you have the capital reserve to not only buy the business but to sustain the business as you grow forward. Because on a startup company, you're not making any money for a while. You know that, right? So you have to carry yourself until you get into the black. You're going to be in the red in the beginning, and you got to be willing to work a lot of hours. I mean, it's so important that it's not a 9 to 5. It's 24/7, 365, at least for the first year.
Yeah, and I love when you started working in Chicago in the coin laundry industry. You were a helper to the vice president of the company, and you follow him and the other person in the company like a tail. And you obviously were helping them, but you just took everything and you learned everything you could about this industry that you had no idea about. Never really thought about it. You learned everything you could. You put the work in. You were there earlier before the owner, and you took it seriously. And you, again, got all the way to corporate America, now own your own successfully run company in Chicago. It's one of the biggest companies in the industry. So it's so inspiring, Dr. Robert. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before we go?
Well, I'd like people to know how to find our body of work, and that would be on our website at from the Barrio. That's BARRIO.com. And if somebody'd like to speak to me directly, I want to give you a line where you can reach out, and it'll come straight to me at 312-933-5619. And if you're going to start in business, make sure that you're grounded. Be nice to people, be humble and kind always.
Be loving, because you never know. That person might be there one day to give you a helping hand, and might be the connection to a big company. You never know. I mean, I've seen that. And it was actually advice that my parents gave as well when I was a kid, is always be nice to people. You never know if they're going to be in a position to help you. So always be kind. You don't do it for handouts, but you do it to always be kind, bless everyone, love everyone, because God loves everyone. And you just never know. You just never know. So to God be all the glory, Dr. Renteria. I'm glad you shared how to reach you. Definitely, guys, take advantage of his wealth of knowledge. Congratulations on being a curriculum in many schools around the country, in the boxing community now. I know there's so many other places and other organizations that are going to use this amazing story that you've shared with us for God's glory and for the betterment of our country and our children, in Jesus' name. So thank you, Doctor, for being with us.
Are you happy with how chemical detergents and bleaches clean your laundry? If you think there's only one way to get your clothes and linens clean, take a closer look. Does your laundry smell fresh, or is it just masked by artificial fragrances? Do your new clothes look faded and worn after only a few months? Do you need to use fabric softeners to keep your clothes feeling soft? And have you ever thought about the amount of money you're spending each year doing such a simple chore? The average American household does around 392 loads of laundry per year. By the time you add the cost of detergent, fabric softener, water, and energy, you're paying up to $1.50 per load. That adds up to $588 each year. Until now. Instead of scrubbing your clothes like traditional detergents, Laundry Pro 2.0 gently and thoroughly lifts dirt from between the fibers using only hydrogen and oxygen-based oxidizers. This means no more fading colors, waxy soap residue, or chemicals left behind. You'll start to notice how your towels stay softer and fluffier, that dark fabrics hold their colors longer, and whites are brighter than ever.
Visit www.healthyhometex.com. Use coupon code Dear Anna Ruth